So our task is to translate verbal statements into symbols or vice versa. So I'm going to translate a couple of sentences into symbols and then also look at symbolic statements and translate those to kind of go both ways. And so in your reference sheet, you should be looking at the meanings of these connective symbols. So you should know, or you can refer to the reference sheet to know that this means the and connective, this symbol means the or connective, this is the if-then conditional, and the biconditional, and this represents negation. Right. And then another thing you'll notice is that we have 3 simple statements, and this is what how they're defined. And then the third thing that we have to notice is that because there's multiple statements and there's multiple connectives, the comma tells us where to put our parentheses, because if you have multiple statements on the same side of the comma, you're going to put those in parentheses. Okay, so let's look at the first sentence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to translate identify the simple statements first, as well as their negations if there's any. So the water is not warm, so that looks like a P statement, only negated because of that not. So it's a negated P. Then the next one, the sun is shining. So the sun is shining, that's a Q statement. We go swimming. That's an R statement. Now let's identify the connectives. Actually, before we even identify the connectives, let's look at the comma. So the comma right here tells me that because I've got Q and R on the same side of the comma, they're going to be placed in parentheses. So that's what the comma tells me to do, to put sentences on the same side of the comma in parentheses. And so the sun is shining, or we go swimming, would be translated like this, so Q or R. Now, kind of a tricky part, possibly, but the way that the negated P is linked to all this is through the and connective, but the and connective does have to appear outside of the parentheses. So the ultimate translation would be negated P and parenthesis Q or R, like so. Okay, and of course that's A right there. Okay, so next one. So the next one is a little trickier because, well, first of all, we are recognizing there's going to be the conditional, so the air connective at some point. But let's identify simple statements first. So the sun is shining. The sun is shining. That's a Q statement. The water is warm. That's a P statement. We go swimming. That's an R statement. Okay. The comma tells me the 2 sentences on the same side are Q and P, so they're going to be in parentheses. Now this if, then keyword tells me that the way that the Q and P are connected are using the conditional. So if Q, then P. And the last thing I need to include is that the R is linked to all this using the or connective. So the final answer would be if Q, then P, close parenthesis, or R. And that is I. All right, let's just do one more. Okay, so this third sentence says, the water is warm, so that's P. The sun is shining, so that's Q. We don't go swimming, so that's a negated R. And they're connected. Well, first of all, I'm recognizing the comma here is telling me that the P and the Q are going to be in parentheses, linked with an or, and then negated R would be linked to all this with an and. All right, so I've translated every single word in that sentence. So my final statement is P or Q and not R. So P or Q and not R. All right. Now, so let's look at a few symbolic statements. So we haven't identified this one. So let's just see how we can go the other way. So if we are faced with a symbolic statement, how would we write a sentence for it? So this one is a little tricky, but the first thing that I would recognize is the fact that I have the arrow, one-sided arrow. That means I'm going to add the word if in front of negated R, and I'm going to add the word then in front of Q and P. So let me write that so far. So if negated R, then Q and P. Now, because Q and P are in parentheses, that means I'm going to be also adding a comma, probably over here in my sentence. And now the last thing that we'll do is, and so again, the reason why we included if and then is because of that arrow. The conditional arrow means I have to, in English, add the if in front of the statement in front of the arrow and add the then in front of the statement that the arrow points to. And so the ultimate translation would be if negated R is if we don't go swimming, then the sun is shining and the water is warm. So there it is. If we don't go swimming, then the sun is shining and the water is warm. That's the English translation of that. Okay, let's try one more symbolic into English. Okay, let's do C right here. C. All right. So C is, once again, a conditional statement. So a conditional statement tells me that I'm going to be adding the word if in front of Q, and I'm going to be adding the word then in front of P, double-sided arrow R. So let's write that so far. So if Q, then P, double-sided arrow R, and because of parentheses, I've also added a comma. Okay. And so then in English, Q stands for the sun is shining. So if the sun is shining, then the water is warm, if and only if, that's what the double-sided arrow means, we go swimming. Okay. So once again, if Q, if the sun is shining, where is it? If the sun is shining, then the water is warm, if and only if we go swimming. So that matches our translation. See if there's any other ones. Okay, I think that's good. If you run into any specific ones that are having trouble with, you can always contact me, message the instructor. All right. Actually, let's go ahead and enter our answers real quick. All right, let's do this. So the water is not warm. That's a negated P. And the sun is shining, or go swimming. That was A. If the sun is shining, so I'm going to be putting Q at the front of the arrow. Then the water is warm. Oh wait, so because of the comma, if P, then Q in parentheses. So that looks like I. Or, yeah. The water is warm, P or the sun is shining, so P or Q in parentheses. P or Q in parentheses. There it is. O and not R, yeah. That's D. The water is warm and the sun is shining. P and Q or R. So that's an F. If the sun is shining, so that means Q is going to be at the start of an arrow, and then the double-sided arrow represents the if and only if, so that's a C. The sun is shining if and only if the water is warm. So Q, double-sided arrow, P in parentheses, and we go swimming. And then we go into, again, in parentheses, we're going to have a Q, then P, Q, then P, Q, then P, Q, then P. Is that it? That's an or R. I already did that. Oh, there it is. Here it is, J. If the sun is shining and we go swimming, so that's the condition in the parentheses, then the water is warm. That looks like this. Notice because of the comma here, both the sun is shining and going swimming. So Q and R are at the start of the arrow because they're both the condition for the water to be warm. All right, so that one is a little different. Okay. And if we don't go swimming, so not R, let's B. Okay. If the water is not warm, not P, not P, there it is, C. Okay. That was a long video.